JB here. Thursday, January 30th, 326. This fine afternoon. Talk quick about the markets, some of the trades, some updates. Go from there. S&P in rally mode. Right at the highs right now. SPY's at 606.53. I always say what a difference a day or two makes. And Monday, you would have thought that the tech bubble, the AI bubble's popping. We're going to have this big correction, or we're going to go into bear market territory. A black swan event, this DeepSeek situation. And yeah, it turns out like what all the other situations have been over the last, since 2008, 2009, they've buy the dip. Who knows how this all plays out? I still think that 610 handle is going to come on a SPY, which we were at only a week ago. And I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow, but maybe into next week, pending Apple, right? So Apple reports after the close today. Their story, it used to be about phones, right? And their hardware, their AirPods, all that stuff. Now a lot of it, then it started to turn into the iTunes, right? And their app store. And now will be around AI, and I think that's some of the next leg that we saw with Apple. When it had its earnings, it was able to reverse course. I don't know, it was last quarter, the quarter before, but I think that's probably gonna be more of it. So I don't know how much if there was weakness in China's sales, how much is that going to matter? I just hope there's no crazy surprises. If not, I think market heads higher. And if you had told me UPS was going to be down 10, 12%, whatever it is today, Microsoft was going to be taken on the chin, down 6%. Meta, which at one point almost went into the red, or did go into red, it was only up 2% today. I would say, wow, the market would. And you asked me where the market was, I would probably say down quite a bit. And to see us, market just shrugging it off, I think that's a good sign. Not only that, you have Big Blue. Big Blue. I used to be trading IBM last couple of years on the premise eventually that it was, they had bought back so much of its share count through buybacks, and then they started cutting costs to the point that eventually the declining revenues, the comps are going to get so easy that they're going to return to growth. And that's what's happened with IBM. Shame on me for not sticking through that trade for the last whatever percent it's ran, but happy to see that one going. And we'll see what happens after the close today. GDP numbers this morning, weaker than expected. Again, I was talking about GDP numbers. It's like the biggest backward-looking number that you can think of. Post a nice little chart too from Ryan Dietrich, shared around January performance. And you take a look, the S&P is I think it was down 1% coming in today on the week. So depending what happens tomorrow, that would put the S&P up about 3.7% for the month. So unless there's some crazy big sell-off tomorrow, it's going to end in the green in January. And 76% of the time that January starts off green, the market ends higher for the full year. So always, there's obviously a 24% chance if you look at the historicals that it doesn't happen. But I always like to have the odds in my favor, right? That's the best way to do things. Make sure the odds are in your favor. So big spot, 610. And crazy enough, at 11:15 or so, it looked like the SPY was going to test that 600 handle again. I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. And if you saw my post on FinTwit, it's like you scroll through FinTwit, and some people I try to get due diligence, or you look at charts or sentiment or things like that. So I'm always looking through whether it be stock twits or X or even reading articles. And it's like some of these folks who trade, they make it seem like it's easy to hold positions, like, oh, it's an easy tape. I'm like, I don't know what tape you're looking at. Some of these swings are tough. Even with the Fed, it was tough yesterday at between 2 and 2:30. Like, oh my, we could have certainly broken down, but thankfully markets held. And when you're trading options that expire in a couple of days, makes it even more important to either have a plan in place, or to have something that offsets it via the hedges. But thankfully for now, haven't had to do that. All right, so that's the overall market. Apple after the close. There's other earnings tomorrow morning. I forget who reports. Oh yeah, Caterpillar too, right? Thankfully, I was looking at Caterpillar. I didn't even look at their earnings. I saw it was down in the morning. If you had told me they were down too, I'd be like, wow, the market would be taking on chin, but it isn't. Small caps up 1.5%, so finally outperforming. The twice as large percent of gain than the S&P. So that bodes well. So now individual names. At first, I'll just talk about MDB. So, I went and got those spec calls as it was rallying on Tuesday, as people were realizing, hey, maybe consumption is going to increase if AI becomes less expensive, right? Becomes more, it will increase demand and usage. And if that's the case, then you have these cloud names that are just going to explode or just have more revenue opportunities. MDB's right in that wheelhouse. Snow, ESTC, they all rallied, gave some of it back on Wednesday, and then Microsoft posted some weak cloud numbers last night. So I think that's some of it. But if you look at it, was starting to bounce, and I was actually looking at some calls in the morning. I actually was looking at 290s. Then it was bouncing 270. I'm like, oh, I missed it. Pulled back in by the noon hour, and then once it started to go again, I said I got to get some strikes on here for some spec calls into tomorrow. And the thing with MDB, the calls are always, the premiums are very elevated. So it makes it tough to find a risk reward strike. But the good thing is, if it does move a couple bucks, those premiums keep creeping higher. So uh, they tend to hold up pretty well. So we'll see how tomorrow pans out. But I would not be surprised to see this up 4 or 5% tomorrow, especially if Apple numbers are in line. So that's MDB. Adobe finally broke that 445 handle. I thought once it did that, it was going to be another 2 to 3%. Of course, what does it do? Breaks 445, gets up to 448. It's been stuck there ever since. So maybe tomorrow's the day. Unfortunately, my 460 strikes have taken on the chin, or the remaining of the freebies that I was holding. I was looking at next week's, and next week calls, it's like the 480s. But I mean, it seems like, I don't know if it's 3 or 4 weeks in a row I've been playing Adobe calls. So what I was saying it yesterday, right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. It's fool me 3 or 4 times with Adobe. Although Adobe this week was able to lock some to cover costs. So as much as I think at some point it's going to happen, it's been tough. So I'll probably pass on adding anything unless there's some strength tomorrow. So that's Adobe. Which brings me to BIDU. And BIDU, it was running, well, it was like flat. Even overnight, it was 89, flat at 90. And, you had the China New Year. Some of the markets were closed Tuesday into Wednesday, and then some more were closed Wednesday. So I don't know if that had any impact on the lackluster overnight session for BIDU, but they kind of opened flat, and then it started getting a bid. And then once it started getting up near 92, I thought, if it continues to rally, I want to have a position into next week, which I was looking on Monday and Tuesday when it was rallying, so I can lock the rest of my 95s in. So sure enough, I went and got those February 7th for next week, the 105s. And then the premiums weren't really going up that much, even though the stock was at 92, then 93. And then finally the premiums started to creep in. I was able to lock some of those calls in for next week for a double to cover costs. And then I was actually looking to close the rest of my 95s. They were up over 600% just a little while ago. But you know what? I already locked some in to cover costs, and I locked some in for profits. And now I'm riding it free. And I think it's going to be a gap and go. Like, I think overnight there's going to be a gap, and tomorrow's gap higher will be the chance for me to lock the rest of the weeklies in, and I'll just hold the rest into next week. So that's kind of the plan there. High risk. Well, not even high risk because I'm riding freebies. So the risk is, the risk of profits eroding. Yeah, that's the high risk, but I like the setup. So not only that, it's over its 200-day moving average for the first time since back in early October. So I think that's a good sign. And not only that, it's that whole sentiment shift in China now, right? With the DeepSeek. First, it's a bad thing, but now you're like, wow, that's a good thing for AI. It's a good thing for China names. And then, so that's kind of, and not only that, it sounds like all that rhetoric, the hard talk around tariffs and stuff, I think that's going to get, there's a lot of expectations that there's going to be huge tariffs, and Trump is not going to be able to work with Xi over there, however you pronounce it. But I think it's overplayed, that story. So anyway, we'll see. And I think it's in the best interest of the U.S. and China to obviously play ball. So that's BIDU. What a monster this week. Shopify, another monster. I was talking about it breaking 120. And I was going to hold the rest of my freebie calls for that break. But considering where it was yesterday and the day before, I'm like, I got to take the profits. So I locked the rest of my 120 strikes in for, well, close to 500%. I got up to 119.83 before as much as maybe it does break 120, I just didn't want to hold on to that and the profits. So not sure I'll revisit tomorrow, but I won't be surprised to see it over 120, but great trade as well this week. And then brings me to Roku, and Roku was at 85.70 just a little while ago. Now it's down here at 85.29. 86.75 is the December 8th high, and that would be the 52-week high. So once it breaks that, I think 90 is not that far away, and then maybe just some FOMO. So I was hesitant on adding more strikes, but I might get some pre-earnings strikes because earnings are going to be somewhere between February. I would assume it's going to be after February 14th expiration, right? So if it is before that and I get some February 14th strikes, maybe we get an instant premium build. So I might look for some calls on Roku, not right now, not today, but possibly tomorrow. Some more strikes to go as my February calls at February 21st. Take a look at the short-term chart too. Just some big spots there. Also, I don't know why I don't have Arista Networks. So Arista Networks, again, I posted it. I got some Lottos yesterday, and then it was at 110 all the way back to 107. And I put in the chat room on FinTwit. I said, I'm going to hold these into the Fed and earnings, right? So then in the afternoon, all of a sudden the premium started spiking on the calls. They were up 100%. So I held them into the close. And then it's gapping higher overnight. And then the overnight session, it was 112.55 or so on the bid. Then it's 113 in the morning. I'm like, wow, I'm gonna be able to lock some of my calls in for 100% or so, or some of them just to cover costs. And then right before the bell, it starts spiking. It's like 115, uh, somewhere in there. So I'm trying to get a read on where it's going to open. And all of a sudden I look and it's like three something on the calls. I'm like, whoa. So I tried to chase it at $3, couldn't get a fill. And I finally got some out at 260 and change, whatever that was, 262. So I, over 400%. I held the rest. Of course, in hindsight, would love to lock them all in. But at the time, I thought, hey, this is going over 118, where I thought what was going on the watch list. I still think it has a shot. Calls are still up a double, so I'll hold the rest of those. But what a monster on that one. I'm trying to think of some of the other names here. That's it. I was looking at gold at the start of the week. I mean, how crazy this move up in gold. At some point, it's gonna be the short of all shorts. Maybe, I don't know. I keep thinking that, but we'll see where that happens. Yeah, that's it, folks. Have a great afternoon. I'll be back. Rock and roll.